Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are and when you're listening to this. We are back with another episode. Once again, I am changing up the format. This week, you are getting a select preview of a course I've been working on for the Listenable platform. The course is called All About Pyramids, and in it I'm covering everything from the earliest pit graves of pre-dynastic Egypt all the way up to the Great Pyramid of Giza, and dispelling a lot of myth and mystery along the way. In this course, I'll be exploring the evolution of burial technology, from the earliest of mastabas through to the step pyramids, through to the most complex pyramid that we're aware of, which is, of course, the Great Pyramid of Khufu. But there are a lot of steps along the way, and that's what I'll be exploring in this course. Now, if you enjoy this episode and you want to hear more of the course, it's over on Listenable. Listenable is an online audio education platform. So it's on-the-go learning. You can listen to, 5 to 10 minute audios of different lessons on multiple subjects, anytime, anywhere. They have hundreds of courses covering everything from health to psychology to ancient history, and I've got a few up there myself. This is the first Egyptology course I've done for them. The other two are actually more closely linked to the work I do with presenting. But I'm hoping to do a lot more history over there, and this is a taste of things to come. So, if you enjoy this episode, I have an affiliate link. I will post that in the description, and you can go and you can check that out, and apparently you can cancel any time. The first 7 days are free, so you can probably go and listen to the course, and then if you like what you hear, stick around, and if you don't, there's no commitment. We will be coming back to our regular format soon with some more interviewees and guests lined up. And then I'll be taking a seasonal break, as ever, so that I can catch up on paid work and house renovations. So, please do stick around. There'll be a lot more interesting stuff to come. And I hope you enjoy this first lesson of All About Pyramids. Welcome to the course All About Pyramids on Listenable. All About Pyramids. Lesson 1. The Foundations of Egyptian Society. Welcome. My name is Paul Harrison, and I'm a Doctor of Egyptology. If you're listening to this, then chances are, like me, you've found the achievements of the ancient Egyptians fascinating and want to crack some of the mystery. The pyramids of Egypt have been a source of allure and speculation since before even the ancient Greeks first explored these exotic lands and marvelled at their sheer size and grandeur. Built over 4,000 years ago, their mysteries have endured to modern times, causing debate among archaeologists, Egyptologists, alternative theorists, and even prompting alien-centered conspiracy theories. Historically, it was generally accepted that the Egyptians themselves had built the pyramids as tombs for their rulers, a concept which only came into question in relatively recent times. In this course, we'll be looking at not only the hows and whys of the pyramids, but also examining the evidence that makes Egyptologists so convinced of their chronology and purpose. We'll explore the evolution of the Egyptian tomb into the pyramid in its historical context, and weigh the evidence against more speculative ideas. We won't labour over a list of dry facts about the height and dimensions of every tomb and pyramid in Egypt, as that would become dull very quickly. But where relevant, some statistics will be presented, if only to drive home the magnitude of the ancient Egyptians' achievements. I will be using terms like king and pharaoh interchangeably, mostly because that's how they're used within Egyptology. Finally, I'll be referring to time periods mostly by dynasty, but also using the BC AD format, as again, this is the standard within Egyptology. The dynasty model is used to track the reigns of successive families in Egypt, starting with Dynasty 0 around 3200 BC and ending with Dynasty 30 around 340 BC. After that, we tend to measure reigns in terms of the foreign rulers such as the Ptolemies. Burials and beliefs. Before we get into the details, we should first consider the framework of religious beliefs and perspectives on death that informed Egyptian mortuary practices. These beliefs are inherently reflected in the myth of the first murder, and that's found in the legend of Osiris. Osiris was a god who was said to rule Egypt in its earliest mythological age, along with his partner and divine sister Isis, the goddess of magic and motherhood. Osiris brought knowledge of agriculture and organisation to the peoples of Egypt and was said to be a benevolent king. His brother, Set, was said to be covetous of Osiris's rule. Set tricks Osiris into a beautiful box, the first sarcophagus, and throws it into the river Nile. When Isis recovers Osiris, Set hacks his body into pieces and murders him. Isis then reconstitutes the body, bringing it back together, and thereby creating the first mummy. They conceive the son, Horus, and Osiris becomes ruler of the underworld. Horus then avenges his father's murder and becomes the rightful king, displacing his uncle the usurper, who is banished to the desert. So what does this myth tell us? Well, several important concepts that the Egyptians appeared to believe in, which would directly influence their burial practices. The first and most significant to our purpose is that belief in life after death. Osiris is resurrected and becomes ruler of the dead, implying that there are dead in some form for him to rule over. So this establishes a kingdom in the afterlife where the living will journey after shedding their mortal coil. Secondly, we see the origin, perhaps, or symbolic significance of mummification. In Egypt, preservation of the body was thought to be essential to the soul's journey and preservation in the afterlife. As such, not just the body but the likeness of the person was required to stay intact. Otherwise, your immortality couldn't be assured. There are other considerations also. When retrieving the body of Osiris, for instance, Isis brings it back to Egyptian soil to be resurrected. This myth highlights the requirement of being buried on Egyptian land. One of the worst tragedies for an Egyptian was to die abroad, which is one of the reasons that Egyptians didn't ever set up permanent colonies outside their own borders, but rather went to the trouble of performing successive raids on neighbouring kingdoms. These beliefs first iterated in the pyramid texts of what we call the 5th dynasty, but believed to be much older, most certainly guided and strongly influenced Egyptian mortuary practices. They often explain what we might consider to be strange customs. But there are other, more practical considerations which we should not ignore, as not everything in Egypt is dictated by belief alone. What we'll come to see is that the pyramids represent a giant step in the arms race that was tomb security. The everyday Egyptians used to bury their dead in pits, not that dissimilar to the way we bury people now. Sometimes the pit would be shorn up with stones, but otherwise security was not a strong feature. But jackals, which feed primarily on decaying flesh, were abundant in ancient Egypt. You've likely seen or heard of the Egyptian god Anubis, the jackal-headed deity. Well, the association between jackals and death comes from the jackals often seen prowling mortuary areas looking for burials to dig up. If you've ever owned a dog inclined to dig, you can see how this would become a serious problem with simple pit graves. The other concern was that unsecured pits could easily be dug up and robbed. Now, because of this belief in the afterlife, the Egyptians started to believe early on that earthly wealth would be taken with you. So it was desirable to take your prized possessions to the grave. Of course, as the state became more centralized and wealth more abundant in certain social positions, finding ways to bury loved ones with their wealth and not lose it to thieves became an increasing concern. For the commoners, the response was the development of burial mounds, stone and sand covering the gravesite to protect it. But for the elites, the solutions became increasingly complex. The earliest royal burials. The earliest evidence we have of royal burials comes from a site known as Cemetery U at Abydos. This site features tombs dug deep into the ground, many featuring chambers separated by mud brick walls. These tombs belong to rulers of what we call Dynasty 0. Egyptian history is broken down into the reigns of successive royal dynasties, all the way from 0 to 30, later followed by Ptolemaic and Roman rulers. Dynasty 0 is so called because it was discovered and interpreted after the first dynasty kings had been named. These kings, with names like Iri-Hor, Ka, and Nama, ruled Egypt in its very earliest stages, but already this was a powerful land, with agriculture, strong levels of production, mining, and even some international trade. So it's fair to say that these rulers would have been wealthy and wanted to protect their grave goods. These structures were large excavations and often contained multiple underground storage areas or rooms. These would have once housed goods, and in some cases satellite graves would have housed guards or retainers who were buried with the king to accompany him on his journey to the afterlife. These sites have very little if any surface structure remaining, though accompanying funerary chapels made of mud brick would have served the cult of the king after his death. The remains of these structures can be found near the royal tombs of Abydos, though very little remains standing. It was the development of the mastaba that would really get the ball rolling on funerary architecture and provide the literal next step towards the pyramid, and we'll look at that in the next lesson. Thanks for listening. That's all we have time for this week. Thank you for joining me once again. I've been Dr. Paul Harrison. Let me know how you feel about this particular format, and I'll see about creating more in the future. And once again, thanks for listening.